My older brother was always the golden child. "You'll get the scraps," he laughed. When Dad died, my brother said, "The house is mine, you get the garage." But in that garage was something he never suspected. It's funny the things you remember. Not the big moments, not the speeches or the ceremonies. It's the small stuff. The smell of my dad's workshop, a mix of sawdust, motor oil, and the faint, sweet scent of the pipe tobacco he used to keep in a tin long after he quit smoking. Or the specific way the late afternoon sun would cut through the grimy window of the garage, lighting up a million dancing dust motes. I think about that a lot now. That light. It felt like a spotlight on a world that only Dad and I really understood. For everyone else, especially my brother Mark, it was just a dusty old garage, a place for junk, scraps. Mark was 4 years older than me, and from the second he was born, he was dipped in gold. He had the right hair, the right smile, the right everything. He aced his classes without trying, was captain of the football team, and had a charm that could talk a bird out of a tree. I was Liam. Quieter, awkward. I was the kid who'd rather take apart a lawnmower engine than go to a school dance. Dad got it. He'd come out to the garage, watch me work, and hand me a wrench without saying a word. That was our language. A comfortable, greasy silence. Mark's language was different. It was loud, and it was always about winning. "Watch and learn, little brother," he'd say, flashing a perfect report card. "This is how you get ahead." When he went to a fancy business school on a scholarship, my parents were over the moon. Mom framed his acceptance letter. I got a pat on the back for fixing her finicky dishwasher. We were two different sons on two different tracks, and it was clear to everyone which track was the express line to success. The day Dad died was like any other Tuesday, which felt like the world's cruelest joke, a heart attack, swift and sudden, while he was reading the morning paper. No goodbyes, no final words, just a deafening silence where his presence used to be. The funeral was a blur. I remember Mark, standing tall in a perfectly tailored black suit, giving a flawless eulogy about the great man our father was. He spoke of ambition and legacy, words that sounded hollow and foreign to me. I couldn't speak. The words were stuck in my throat, tangled up with a lump that had been living there for days. All I could think about was the half-finished birdhouse sitting on the workbench in the garage. Dad and I were supposed to finish it that weekend. After the funeral, the reality of life without him began to set in. It was a cold, hard thing. The lawyer's office was even colder. It was a sterile beige room that smelled of old paper and furniture polish. Mom sat beside me, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Mark sat opposite us, looking like he owned the place. He probably already did. The lawyer, a man named Mr. Thompson with a voice as dry as dust, read the will. It was simple, straightforward. Mom was taken care of course. A few heirlooms were mentioned, and then came the property. "To my son, Mark," the lawyer read. "I leave the family home at 123 Maple Street and all its contents." I felt the air leave my lungs. I looked at Mom, but her eyes were glassy, fixed on a spot on the wall. Mark just nodded slowly, a somber, practiced look on his face. I knew what was coming next. It was the punchline to a joke that had been my whole life. "And to my son, Liam," Mr. Thompson continued, clearing his throat. "I leave the garage and its contents, as well as my collection of tools." I didn't hear anything after that. The world went fuzzy. The garage. He left me the garage. It was his sanctuary, our sanctuary. But in the cold light of a legal document, It was just a detached outbuilding, a storage shed, a scrap. Later that day, we were back at the house, the air thick with the smell of sympathy casseroles. Mark found me out on the back porch. He put a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that was supposed to be comforting but felt heavy, proprietary. "Hey," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I know this is tough, but Dad knew you loved tinkering out there. It's fitting, you know?" I just stared at the backyard, at the peeling paint on the garage door. He chuckled, a low, condescending sound. "Look, I know what you're thinking. But be realistic, Liam. What would you do with the house? You can barely manage your rent. This is for the best." Dad knew I could handle the responsibility. He leaned in closer. "The house is mine. You get the garage." He said it with a little smirk, the same one he'd had since we were kids. The one that said, "I win." That night, I told my wife, Sarah, what happened. We'd been married for 3 years, and she had always been my rock. She was beautiful, smart, and way out of my league, something Mark never missed an opportunity to point out. She listened, her face a mask of sympathy, and rubbed my back. "That's awful, honey," she said. "Just awful. Mark has always been so entitled." "It's not about the money, Sarah," I tried to explain. "It's about what it means. He gets everything. The memories, the house we grew up in. I get the shed." "It's more than a shed, Liam," she said softly. "It was your place with him. Maybe that's the most valuable thing he could have left you." I wanted to believe her. For the next few months, I tried. I grieved. I went to work at the auto shop, came home to our small apartment, and tried to build a new normal. Mark was busy, of course. He was managing the estate, which meant moving his own family, his perfect wife, Jessica, and their 2 perfect kids, into my childhood home. He'd call me with updates, his voice dripping with false concern. "Just wanted to let you know we're repainting the living room, getting rid of that awful wallpaper Mom loved. A fresh start, you know?" Each call was a small twist of the knife. I started spending my weekends at the garage. It was the only place I felt close to my dad. I didn't do much. I'd just sit on the old wooden stool, run my hand over the scarred workbench, and breathe in that familiar smell. I organized his tools, lining up wrenches and screwdrivers in neat rows. It was a way of putting my own chaotic feelings in order. The day it all started to unravel was a Thursday, about 6 months after Dad died. The sky was a bruised purple, threatening rain. I'd had a long day at the shop, and all I wanted was a quiet evening at home with Sarah. But when I called her on my way home, she sounded off, distant. "Hey, honey," she said, her voice a little too bright. "Listen, something came up. My friend, Amanda, you know, from my yoga class. It's her birthday, and a few of us are going out for a small get-together to celebrate. It's just a low-key thing." "Oh, okay," I said, a little disappointed. "Where at?" "Oh, Fuakar, just this new little bistro downtown, the Gilded Spoon. It's supposed to be really nice." Something about the way she said it felt rehearsed. "Okay, well, have fun. I'll just grab something to eat on my way home." "Actually," she said, and I could hear background noise, music and chatter. "Could you maybe pick me up, say around 11? I don't want to leave my car there overnight." "Yeah, sure, no problem," I said. 11 it is. Love you." "You too," she said, and hung up before I could say it back properly. I drove home to our empty apartment. The silence felt heavier than usual. I ate a cold sandwich standing over the sink and watched the clock. 10 o'clock, 10:30. At 11:15, I grabbed my keys and headed out. The Gilded Spoon was on the other side of town, in the upscale, trendy district. It wasn't the kind of place Sarah and her friends usually went. They were more of a cozy pub crowd. As I drove, my mind drifted. I thought about Dad, about the house, about Mark. I felt that old, familiar feeling creep in. The feeling of being on the outside, looking in. I was driving to a fancy restaurant. I couldn't afford to pick up my wife, who was, in that moment, living a life that felt completely separate from mine. I pulled up across the street from the restaurant a few minutes early, around 10:50. The place was all glass and glowing lights. I could see the silhouettes of people inside, laughing and talking. I scanned the room, looking for Sarah's distinctive red coat. I didn't see her. Maybe she was in the back or in the restroom. I decided to wait. 11 o'clock came and went. Then 11:10. I sent her a text. "Hey, I'm out front." No reply. I started to feel a small knot of annoyance tighten in my stomach. She knew I had to be up at 6 a.m. for work. This was inconsiderate. At 11:20, I was about to call her when I saw a couple emerge from the restaurant. They were laughing, their heads close together. The woman was beautiful, elegant in a black dress I'd never seen before. The man had his arm around her waist, his hand resting possessively on her hip. For a second, I didn't recognize her. She looked different, happier, more alive than I'd seen her in months. And then she turned her head slightly under the glow of the street lamp, and the world stopped. It was Sarah. My heart hammered against my ribs. I couldn't breathe. Who was this guy? He was tall, well-dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my car. He leaned in and whispered something in her ear, and she threw her head back and laughed. It was a genuine, unrestrained laugh, the kind she used to share with me. My first instinct was to jump out of the car, to scream, to demand an explanation. But I was frozen, paralyzed by a horrifying magnetic pull. I just watched. They walked down the street, away from where I was parked. They weren't heading for the parking lot. They were just strolling, like two people with no intention of going home. And then the man turned his head, just for a second, to look at a car that drove past. The streetlights illuminated his face, that familiar, handsome, confident face. The face I had seen every day of my life, the face of the golden child. It was my brother, Mark. I felt a cold wave wash over me, so intense it made me physically sick. It wasn't just shock. It was a sickening, horrifying clarity. The distant calls, the work events, the way she defended him, but not quite enough. It all clicked into place, a horrifying mosaic of betrayal. My brother, my wife. They stopped at the corner, waiting for the light to change. Mark leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a friendly peck. It was a deep, passionate kiss, right there on the street corner under the unblinking eye of the traffic light. And Sarah kissed him back. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the empty street corner after they had gone. It could have been minutes or an hour. The world had gone silent again, just like the day Dad died. But this was a different kind of silence. This was the silence of a life being completely and utterly shattered. The house, the money, the inheritance, that was all just stuff. This was my heart, my trust, my entire world. And my brother, the golden child, had taken that too. He hadn't just settled for the scraps. He had to have it all. And as I sat there in my beat-up truck, staring at the fancy restaurant, one thought burned through the fog in my mind. He didn't leave me the garage because he thought I'd like it. He left it to me because it was worthless. A final insult. But as that thought settled, another one, a tiny, defiant spark started to glow in the darkness. He thought it was worthless, but he had no idea what was inside. He had no idea what Dad might have left behind. And in that moment, I knew. I had to go back. I had to find out. The drive home from the city was a complete blank. I don't remember the traffic lights or the turns I made. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white, but I couldn't feel them. All I could see was that image, burned onto the back of my eyelids. Sarah and Mark, kissing under the streetlight. It played on a loop, a silent film of my own personal horror movie. Each time it replayed, a new detail would jump out at me. The way his hand was tangled in her hair, the contented smile on her face when they broke apart. It was a performance of intimacy so natural, so practiced, it could only mean one thing. This wasn't the first time. This was their routine. When I got back to our apartment, the key felt strange in my hand, like it belonged to someone else's life. I walked inside. The air was still and quiet. A single lamp was on in the living room, casting long shadows on the wall. Her yoga mat was rolled up in the corner. Her favorite mug was on the coffee table. These little pieces of our shared life now felt like props on a stage, a set for a play where I was the only one who didn't know his lines. I walked through the small space, touching things. The back of the couch, a framed photo of us on our wedding day, smiling like two kids who thought they had it all figured out. The Liam in that photo was a stranger to me now. He was a fool. I didn't know what to do. Should I pack a bag? Should I wait for her to come home and confront her? The thought of seeing her, of having to look into her eyes and pretend I didn't know, was physically nauseating. I felt a surge of white-hot anger, followed by a wave of grief so profound it buckled my knees. I sank onto the floor, my back against the couch, and just sat there in the dark. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Sarah. "Hey, so sorry. Amanda's party is running super late. A bunch of us are just going to crash at her place. Don't wait up. See you tomorrow. Love you." The lie was so effortless, so casual. Love you. The words were a poisoned dart. I didn't reply. I just stared at the screen until the words blurred. That was it. I couldn't stay here. Not tonight. Not ever again. I stood up, walked into the bedroom, and pulled a duffel bag from the back of the closet. I didn't pack much. A few changes of clothes, my toothbrush, my dad's old watch that I wore every day. I looked around the room we had shared, the bed we had slept in. It was tainted. Everything was tainted. I took one last look at the photo on the nightstand, then I walked out the door and didn't look back. I had no idea where to go. I couldn't afford a hotel for more than a night or two. I had no family to turn to. My only family was the one who had just ripped my world apart. And then I knew. There was only one place. I drove to my childhood home, the house that was now Mark's. I didn't go to the front door. I parked down the street and walked up the driveway, my duffel bag slung over my shoulder. The house was dark, except for a single light on in an upstairs window. The master bedroom, my parents' old room. I felt a fresh wave of sickness. I crept around the side of the house, my feet silent on the grass, and made my way to the back. There it was. The garage. The old key was still on my key ring. It slid into the lock with a familiar, grating sound. The door creaked open, and I was hit with that smell. Sawdust, oil, and time. It was the only honest smell left in the world. I stepped inside and pulled the door shut behind me, plunging myself into near total darkness. I felt my way along the wall to the old pull string for the single, bare light bulb that hung from the ceiling. I gave it a tug. The garage flickered to life in a dull, yellow glow. Nothing had changed. The workbench was just as I'd left it, the half-finished birdhouse sitting there like a monument to a better time. Old paint cans were stacked in the corner. Rakes and shovels hung from hooks on the wall. It was cluttered, it was messy, but it was real. It was mine. There was an old, lumpy armchair in the corner that Dad used to sit in, covered in a dusty floral print sheet. I dropped my bag on the floor and sank into it. The springs groaned in protest, and for the first time that night, I let myself break. The anger and the shock gave way to a deep, gut-wrenching sorrow. I cried. I cried for my dad, for the life I thought I had, for the naive man I had been only a few hours ago. I cried until I had nothing left, just a hollow, aching emptiness. I must have fallen asleep right there in the chair, because the next thing I knew, pale morning light was filtering through the dirty window. For the next few days, the garage was my entire world. I didn't call Sarah. I didn't call Mark. I turned my phone off and threw it in my duffel bag. Let them wonder. Let them stew in their own lies. I needed to be alone. I needed to think. I survived on gas station coffee and granola bars. I used the old utility sink in the corner to wash my face. At night, I slept in the chair, wrapped in an old moving blanket I found in a dusty box. It wasn't comfortable, but it was better than the alternative. My days were spent in a kind of fugue state. I started cleaning, organizing. It was the only thing I could control. I went through old boxes of my childhood drawings, my high school yearbooks. I found a box of Mom's old holiday decorations. Each object was a memory, a small ghost from a life that was gone forever. And I started sorting through Dad's things. Really sorting, not just tidying up, but taking inventory. He had tools I hadn't seen in years, specialized wrenches for cars he hadn't owned since the 1980s. Old, beautifully crafted hand planes with wooden handles worn smooth by his grip. It was like an archaeological dig into his life. And the more I sorted, the more I felt a sense of peace settle over me. In this space, surrounded by his things, I wasn't Liam the failure, Liam the cuckold. I was just a son, remembering his father. It was on the third day that I noticed it. Tucked away under the far end of the workbench, almost completely hidden by a stack of old tires, was a large, gray, metal filing cabinet. It was an old, industrial-looking thing, with 2 wide drawers. It looked like something you'd see in a school office or a factory. I'd seen it a million times before, but I'd never really looked at it. It was just part of the background clutter. But now, in my hyper-focused state, it stood out. I knelt down and pulled away the tires. The cabinet was heavy, solid steel. It was covered in a thick layer of dust and cobwebs. I wiped it away with the sleeve of my shirt. Both drawers had a lock, a simple, circular keyhole. I pulled on the top drawer. Locked tight. I tried the bottom one. Same result. Why would Dad keep a filing cabinet locked? He wasn't a secretive man. Or so I thought. He kept important papers, the deed to the house, insurance policies, in a small safe in his closet. Mark had the key to that now, of course. This cabinet was different. This felt hidden. A new kind of energy started to buzz through me, cutting through the fog of my grief. Curiosity. I had to know what was inside. I started searching for a key. I went through every can of nuts and bolts, every coffee mug filled with old pens and drill bits. I checked the pockets of his old work jackets hanging on a hook by the door. Nothing. I searched for hours, my obsession growing with every empty drawer and dusty shelf. I remembered Dad had a habit of hiding spare keys in weird places. The spare house key was always under a specific loose brick in the garden path. The key to his tackle box was taped to the bottom of his favorite fishing lure. He had a system, a logic that was all his own. I had to think like him. Where would he hide the key to a secret filing cabinet in the garage? It would have to be someplace close, someplace he saw every day, but that no one else would ever think to look. My eyes scanned the room, over the tools, the shelves, the clutter. And then they landed on the birdhouse, the half-finished birdhouse on the workbench. We had been working on it together. He'd been showing me how to make the mortise and tenon joints, the old-fashioned way, without screws or nails. It was the last thing we ever did together. I walked over to it and picked it up. It was made of cedar, and it still smelled faintly of the woods. I ran my fingers over the smooth, sanded wood. One side of the roof was attached, the other was still loose, waiting for glue and pegs. I tilted it, looking inside the small, dark opening. And there, nestled in a bed of wood shavings, was a small brass key. It was attached to a simple, handwritten tag made from a scrap of cardboard. The tag just had one word on it: Legacy. My hand was shaking as I pulled the key out. It felt heavy, important. I walked back over to the filing cabinet, my heart pounding in my chest. I knelt down, the key clutched in my hand. I took a deep breath, the dusty air filling my lungs. This felt like a turning point. I didn't know what I would find. Old tax returns? Car titles? Or maybe nothing at all. Maybe it was just a place he stored old receipts. But the tag, legacy. That wasn't a word my dad threw around lightly. Mark talked about legacy. Dad talked about working hard and being a good man. I put the key in the lock of the top drawer. It slid in perfectly. With a turn of my wrist, I heard a loud, satisfying click. The sound echoed in the silent garage. I paused for a second, my hand on the handle. I was on the edge of something. I knew it. I pulled the drawer open. It didn't glide out smoothly. It screeched in protest, the sound of metal on metal that hasn't moved in years. I had to yank it hard to get it to open. It wasn't full of old car parts or instruction manuals. It was packed, from front to back, with files, manila folders, each one neatly labeled in my dad's distinctive, blocky handwriting. But that's not what caught my eye first. Sitting right on top of the files, placed there deliberately, was a thick, off-white envelope. My name was written on the front in that same familiar script. Liam. Just my name. Nothing else. My breath caught in my throat. It was a letter. A letter from my dad. From beyond the grave. I reached in with a trembling hand and lifted it out. It was heavy. I sat back on my heels on the cold concrete floor, the single bare bulb overhead casting a pool of light around me, the letter in my hands. The world outside, Sarah, Mark, the apartment, my shattered life. It all faded away. There was only me, the garage, and my father's last words. I slid my finger under the flap and began to read. The paper was thick and creamy, the kind people used to use for important letters. It felt substantial in my hands. The ink was a dark blue, slightly faded. I unfolded the pages. There were 4 of them, front and back, all covered in my dad's handwriting. It wasn't his usual quick scrawl from a grocery list. This was careful, deliberate, as if every word had been weighed. My dearest Liam, the letter began. Just seeing those words, addressed to me, made my eyes burn. If you are reading this, it means I am gone. And it probably means that things have not gone the way I had hoped. I am sorry for that. I am sorry for so many things, son. Most of all, I'm sorry if I ever made you feel like you were second best. You were never second best. You were just different. And I was never good at saying what I meant. I had to stop and take a breath, pressing the heel of my hand against my eye to stop the tears from falling onto the page. I could hear his voice in the words, that quiet, gravelly tone he used when he was being serious. Your brother, Mark, he's a force of nature. Bright, ambitious. He shines so brightly, it's easy to get blinded, even for me. He knows how to work a room, how to say the right things. He was born for the world as it is. But you, Liam, you were born for the world as it should be. You're honest. You're kind. You have an integrity in your hands, in the way you fix things. That is worth more than all the money and success in the world. I was always so proud of you for that. I just never knew how to tell you without it sounding like a consolation prize. I'm writing this because I've made some mistakes. I let Mark handle too much of the family's finances over the last few years. I'm getting older, and he was so convincing, so sure of himself. He'd come over with spreadsheets and charts, talking about investments and tax shelters. It was all over my head. I trusted him. That was my mistake. A couple of years ago, I started noticing things. Small things. Money moving around in ways that didn't make sense. When I asked him about it, he'd just smile that charming smile and say, "Dad, don't worry about it. It's just smart planning. I'm making our money work for us." But I did worry. So I started my own books, right here in this cabinet. My eyes shot from the letter to the open drawer, packed with manila folders. My heart was a drum against my ribs. It's all in here, Liam. Everything. I wasn't a fool. I just played one. I started a small side business on my own a few years back, buying and restoring old furniture. It was my secret, my escape. And it did well. Very well. Mark never knew about it. The money from that is safe, in an account he doesn't know exists. The details are in the folder labeled Oak and Iron. But that's not the worst of it. The other folders, they tell the real story. Mark hasn't just been managing my money, he's been taking it. He called them loans, but they were never paid back. He used my savings to fund his own lavish lifestyle, to pay for his fancy car, his country club membership. He even convinced me to take out a second mortgage on the house to fund a can't-miss investment opportunity for him. The investment failed, but the mortgage is still there. My house, our house, is leveraged to the hilt because of his greed. The truth is, Liam, the estate isn't what Mark thinks it is. The house is barely worth more than the debt tied to it. The savings he thinks he's inheriting? They're mostly gone. He inherited a mountain of debt that he created himself. He just doesn't know it yet. I wanted to confront him. I tried once. He laughed it off. He told me I was getting old, confused. He made me feel small in my own home. So I did the only thing I could think of. I started documenting everything, every transaction, every lie. I met with a lawyer, a good man named Arthur Henderson. His card is clipped to the front of the main ledger. I was in the process of changing my will. I was going to leave the house to your mother, free and clear, and split what was left of my secret business, my real legacy, between you two. But I wanted to give Mark one last chance to come clean on his own. I was a weak man, Liam. I kept waiting for the right moment. And I guess my time ran out. I'm leaving this all to you. I know you'll know what to do with it. You have a moral compass that Mark lost a long time ago. This isn't about revenge. It's about truth. Don't let him take anything else from you. Your mother deserves to be safe, and you deserve your inheritance. The garage is yours because this cabinet is in it. This is the real inheritance. This is the key. Be strong, son. I love you. Dad, I sat on the cold concrete floor for a long time after I finished reading, the letter resting in my lap. The tears came again, but they weren't tears of grief anymore. They were tears of validation, of a profound, earth-shattering love. He saw me. All this time, he saw me. He knew who I was, and he knew who Mark was. The narrative of my entire life, the story of the golden child and the forgotten son, had been a lie. Or at least, not the whole truth. A cold, hard anger began to replace the sorrow. It was a clean anger, a focused anger. My brother hadn't just betrayed me with my wife. He had betrayed the man who gave him everything. He had preyed on his own father, bled him dry, and then stood at his funeral and delivered a glowing eulogy. He hadn't just taken the house. He had hollowed it out from the inside, leaving behind a pretty shell full of debt. And he had the audacity to call me the one who couldn't handle responsibility. With a new sense of purpose, I turned back to the filing cabinet. I pulled out the first folder. Household Accounts, M. Jennings. Inside were bank statements, receipts, and handwritten notes. It was exactly as Dad had said. Huge sums of money transferred out, labeled Loan to Mark. Then I pulled out another one. Investment, Triton Holdings. It was full of glossy promotional materials for a company that a quick search on my phone told me had gone bankrupt 18 months ago. And there was the paperwork for the second mortgage, signed by my father. The signature looked shaky. Then I found the folder labeled Oak and Iron. Inside was a different story. It was a ledger of sales, records of profits, and a bank book for an account at a small, local credit union. The balance made me gasp. It was a substantial amount of money, more money than I had ever seen in my life. It was the fruit of my dad's secret labor, his quiet rebellion. Finally, I pulled out the main ledger. It was a thick, leather-bound book. Clipped to the front was a business card. Arthur Henderson, attorney at law. Inside, my dad had meticulously cross-referenced everything. Every withdrawal by Mark was noted in red ink, with the date and the excuse Mark had given him. It was a devastating, undeniable record of years of manipulation and theft. On the last page was a note. Met with Art Henderson on June 10th. He has the draft of the new will. He's waiting for my final approval. Dad had died on June 12th. 2 days. Mark's inheritance, his golden prize, had been secured by a margin of 2 days. The final piece of the puzzle slid into place. Sarah. When did her affair with Mark start? I thought back. About 2 years ago, she had started getting distant, taking more girls' nights out. She'd become more interested in expensive things, dropping hints about designers I'd never heard of, restaurants we couldn't afford. Mark had probably been funding her lifestyle too, using my dad's money. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a conspiracy. They were in it together, vultures circling my family, waiting for the old lion to fall. I sat there for hours, surrounded by the paper evidence of my brother's treachery. The sun began to set, casting long orange bars of light through the grimy window, the same light I used to love. Now it felt different. It felt like the light of judgment. I knew I couldn't go to the police. Not yet. This wasn't about putting Mark in jail. My dad hadn't wanted that. He had wanted truth. He had wanted his son to come clean. But that son was gone, replaced by a greedy stranger. This was about justice. A justice my father never got to see. My mind was clear. The path forward was sharp and bright. I took out my phone and turned it back on. Dozens of missed calls and texts flooded the screen. Panicked messages from Sarah, angry ones from Mark. "Where the hell are you, Liam? Sarah is worried sick. Call me." His fake concern was laughable now. I ignored them all. I found the number for Arthur Henderson and dialed it. An older man with a kind, firm voice answered. "Mr. Henderson? My name is Liam Jennings. I'm Frank Jennings' son." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Liam," he said, his voice softening. "I was so sorry to hear about your father. He was a good man. I was expecting a call from... Well, to be honest, I wasn't sure who would call, if anyone. I'm glad you did. Your father told me about you." "He told me about you too," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I found what he left for me. I've read the letter. I've seen the ledgers." "I see," Henderson said quietly. "Then you know. I have the draft of the revised will right here in my office. We were supposed to meet on the 13th to sign it. I am so terribly sorry, son." "It's not your fault," I said, my resolve hardening. "Mr. Henderson, I need your help. But I don't want to go to the authorities. Not yet. I think my dad would have wanted me to handle this a different way." "What do you have in mind?" he asked. I took a deep breath. The plan was forming in my mind, a theatrical, dramatic reveal that Mark, with his love of appearances, would understand perfectly. "I'm going to arrange a family dinner," I said. The phone call to Mark was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I had to swallow every bit of rage and disgust, bury it deep down, and pull a mask of defeat over my face. I practiced the voice in my head first, make it sound tired, broken, small. I waited until late in the evening, then I called him. He picked up on the first ring. "Liam, where have you been? Are you okay? Sarah's been out of her mind with worry." The lie was so smooth, so practiced. I'm okay," I mumbled, letting my voice crack a little. "I just needed some time to think." "Think about what? You just disappeared for days. People were worried." "People." He meant him and Sarah. "I know. I'm sorry," I said. "It's just... everything. Dad. The will. Sarah and I, we've been having some problems." I let that hang in the air. Let him think my breakdown was about my marriage failing, not about him. He softened his tone, shifting into the role of the concerned older brother. "I'm sorry to hear that, man. Anything I can do?" "No, it's done. She's moving out." This part was true. I had finally called her that afternoon, a short, cold conversation. I told her I knew. I didn't say how, I just said, "I know about you and Mark." The silence on her end was all the confirmation I needed. I told her to have her things out of the apartment by the weekend. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. My voice was eerily calm, and I think that scared her more than anything. "Wow. Liam, I'm speechless," Mark said, the fake sympathy oozing through the phone. "That's rough." "Yeah," I said. "Listen, the reason I'm calling, I'm ready to move on, from all of it. I need to sign whatever papers are left for the house, the garage, all of it. I just want to be done." I paused, taking a shaky breath for effect. "But I was wondering, before I do, could we have one last family dinner? At the house, me, you, Jessica. For closure, to say goodbye to the place properly." There was a moment of silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. The victorious brother, granting his defeated, pathetic younger sibling one last request. It was perfect for his ego. "Of course, Liam," he said, his voice magnanimous. "Of course we can. That's a great idea. How about Saturday night? Jessica can make her famous roast chicken. Saturday sounds good, I said. Thanks, Mark. It means a lot. Don't mention it, little brother, he said. We're family. I hung up the phone and felt a wave of nausea. But underneath it, a cold, hard resolve settled in my bones. The stage was set. Saturday night arrived, gray and drizzling. I spent the day in the garage, preparing. I didn't clean it. I left it exactly as it was, dusty, cluttered, smelling of oil and old wood. I took the metal filing cabinet and dragged it to the very center of the room, right under the single bare light bulb. I opened the top drawer. I laid my dad's letter on the workbench, next to the thick, leather-bound ledger. Then I called Mr. Henderson. Be ready, I told him. It's happening tonight. I put on a clean shirt and a pair of jeans, but I made sure I still looked worn down, a man at the end of his rope. When I knocked on the front door of my old home, it was Jessica who answered. She gave me a pitying look. Liam, it's good to see you. Come in, come in. The house was different. The comfortable lived-in clutter of my mom's taste was gone, replaced by a cold, minimalist style. Gray walls, modern art, furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine. It felt sterile, like a hotel lobby. Mark came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel, a broad, welcoming smile on his face. There he is, he boomed. Good to see you on your feet. Can I get you something? A soda? I'm fine, I said quietly, looking around. The place looks different. Just a few upgrades, Mark said breezily, bringing it into the 21st century. Dad let it go a bit, you know. Dinner was agonizing. They treated me like a fragile child who had just suffered a great tragedy. They asked about my plans, offering useless advice. You know, there's always trade school, Mark suggested, as if my years as a skilled mechanic meant nothing. A man needs a trade. Jessica talked about her charity committees and her upcoming trip to Europe. It was a masterclass in condescension. I just nodded and pushed the food around my plate, playing my part. I could feel their smug satisfaction radiating across the table. They had won. They had everything, and I was being cast out with a pity meal. After dinner, as Jessica was clearing the plates, I took a deep breath. Thanks for this, I said, my voice just above a whisper. It was nice. Anytime, Liam, Mark said, clapping me on the shoulder. Now, about that paperwork. We can get it done right now, nice and easy. Yeah, I said. About that. Before we do, there's something I want to show you, both of you. I looked at Jessica. It's in the garage. Mark frowned. The garage? What's out there? A rusty lawnmower you want me to admire? He laughed. Something like that, I said, my voice flat. It won't take long. Curiosity, and perhaps a bit of boredom, got the better of them. Mark shrugged. All right, let's go see your kingdom. I led the way out the back door and across the damp lawn. The rain had stopped, but the air was cold and heavy. I unlocked the garage door and pulled it open, stepping inside and flicking on the light. The single bulb cast its harsh, yellow glare over the room. Mark and Jessica stopped in the doorway, their expressions a mixture of confusion and disdain. Okay, Liam, Mark said impatiently. What is it? I didn't answer. I just walked over to the workbench and stood behind it, like a shopkeeper at his counter. I gestured to the metal filing cabinet in the middle of the floor. Dad left me the garage, I began, my voice quiet but clear. It carried in the small space. You thought it was a joke, a consolation prize. You told me I'd get the scraps. Mark crossed his arms, a smirk playing on his lips. I'm not sure I see your point. My point, I said, picking up the thick envelope from the workbench, is that you were wrong. You thought this place was worthless. But it's not. It's where Dad kept the one thing that was truly valuable. The truth. I held up the letter. He wrote me a letter, Mark. A last letter. Do you want to know what it says? Mark's smirk faltered. Jessica looked uneasy. He told me he was proud of me, I said, my voice growing stronger. He said I had integrity, a word you might need to look up. And he told me he was sorry. Sorry for letting you blind him with your charm and your spreadsheets. What are you talking about? Mark snapped, his voice sharp. I'm talking about this, I said, tapping the open ledger. I'm talking about the loans you never paid back. I'm talking about the second mortgage you convinced him to take out for your failed investment. I'm talking about you stealing from your own father year after year while he was getting older and lonelier. You bled him dry. You hollowed out this house with debt. And then you had the nerve to call it your inheritance. Mark's face had gone pale. He took a step forward. That's a lie. You're lying. Am I? I said calmly. I opened the ledger. Let's see. February 5th, 2018. $50,000 for bridge financing. That's a good one. September 22nd, 2019. $75,000 for the Triton Holdings. Sure thing. How did that work out for you, Mark? It's all here, in Dad's own handwriting. A perfect record of your greed. Jessica looked at Mark, her eyes wide with horror. Mark, what is he talking about? He's crazy. Mark stammered, his eyes darting between me and the ledger. He's making it up. Dad was getting confused at the end. Was he? I interrupted, my voice like ice. He was clear enough to start a secret business you knew nothing about. Oak and Iron. It's a furniture restoration company, and it's very successful. All the money is in a credit union account you don't have access to. That's my inheritance, Mark. The one Dad actually wanted me to have. I let that sink in. The silence was thick, broken only by the hum of the light bulb. He was going to change the will, I said, delivering the final blow. I spoke to his lawyer, Arthur Henderson. He has the draft. Dad was 2 days away from signing it. 2 days away from cutting you down to size and ensuring you got exactly what you deserved. The debt you created. You didn't inherit a fortune, Mark. You inherited a bill. Mark stared at me, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning, panicked horror. The golden child image was cracking, melting away under the harsh garage light to reveal the petty, frightened fraud underneath. And you, I said, turning my gaze to Jessica, who looked like she was about to be sick. You thought you married a king. You married a thief who builds his castle with stolen bricks. Then I looked back at Mark. And Sarah. I know about you and Sarah, Mark. Did you use Dad's money to buy her gifts too? Did you two laugh about the poor, dumb husband and the rich, successful brother while you were spending a dying man's savings? That was it. He snapped. The charm vanished, replaced by pure, ugly rage. You son of a... He lunged for the workbench, for the ledger. But I was ready. I didn't even flinch. Don't, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Don't you dare. It's all been copied, scanned. Mr. Henderson has a full set. So does his associate. It doesn't matter what you do to this book. He stopped, breathing heavily, his face flushed. He looked trapped, defeated. So here's the deal, I said, laying out my terms in the quiet garage. You have two choices. Option 1, you are going to give me half the appraised value of this house, in cash. Not the value after the mortgage you put on it, the full pre-debt value. You're also going to sign a full confession, and we are going to dissolve Dad's estate and split the Oak and Iron account according to the terms of his intended will. We do this quietly. No lawyers, beyond Mr. Henderson to notarize. No police. We handle it as a family. I paused. Option 2. I walk out of this garage right now, I call Mr. Henderson, and he files a civil suit against you for fraud and theft. Then he hands his entire file over to the district attorney's office. You'll lose the house, you'll be disbarred from whatever financial industry you work in, and you'll probably go to jail. And I will make sure Sarah is named as a co-conspirator in the civil suit. I wonder how your marriage will hold up then. Jessica made a small, choked sound. She looked at her husband, not with love or support, but with pure, unadulterated contempt. She turned without a word, walked out of the garage, and I heard the back door of the house slam shut. Mark stared at the empty doorway, and then back at me. The fight had gone out of him completely. He looked smaller, older. He was just a man in a dusty garage, his whole life built on lies, and it had all come crashing down. He slowly, finally, nodded. Okay, he whispered. Option 1. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I just felt a quiet, hollow sense of justice. A duty fulfilled. I took the ledger, the letter, and the files, and packed them into a box. I walked out of the garage, leaving him standing there alone under the bare bulb in the wreckage of his own making. I didn't look back. That was 6 months ago. Mark did as he was told. The money appeared in my account. I never saw him or Jessica again. I heard through my mom that they sold the house and moved away. I divorced Sarah. I used the money from my father's secret business and the settlement from Mark to buy a small workshop. It's bigger than the old garage, but it has the same feel. It smells of sawdust and potential. I'm running Oak and Iron now. It's doing well. It feels right, working with my hands, building something real and honest, just like he did. Sometimes, when the afternoon sun hits the workshop just right, it lights up the dust motes, and I think of my dad. I think of the garage. He didn't leave me scraps. He left me a key to the truth, a key to my own life, free from the shadows of my brother. He left me a legacy, not of money, but of integrity. And that's an inheritance that no one can ever take away. I walked out of the garage and didn't look back. But that's not entirely true. You can't not look back. Not really. The image of my brother standing there, small and broken under that single bare bulb, was seared onto my retinas. I saw it when I blinked. I saw it in the reflection of the rain-slicked driveway. I carried it with me as I walked toward my old truck, the box of my father's truths cradled in my arms like a newborn baby. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was gone, washed away by the cold night air, and in its place was a vast, hollow emptiness. I had won, but it didn't feel like winning. It felt like I had just performed surgery on my own family with a rusty knife, cutting out a cancer but leaving a ragged, gaping wound behind. My hand was on the handle of my truck door when I heard footsteps behind me, quick and unsteady on the gravel. I turned, my body tensing, expecting Mark to have found a last reserve of rage. But it wasn't him. It was Jessica. Her face was a mess. The perfect, polished mask she wore had shattered, and beneath it was a frantic, terrified woman. Her expensive makeup was streaked with tears, her eyes wide and wild. She stopped a few feet from me, wrapping her arms around herself as if she were freezing. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice a raw whisper. "All of it?" I just looked at her, the box in my arms feeling heavier by the second. What was I supposed to say? "Yes, your husband is a monster and your life is a lie. Have a good night." I just nodded. A sound escaped her throat, a half sob, half gasp. The money, the house, is it really all? She couldn't finish the sentence. The house is drowning in debt, I said, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion I felt roiling inside. The fortune you thought you had doesn't exist. It was all a performance, funded by my dad. She stared at me, and for a second, I saw past her fear to the raw calculation in her eyes. She wasn't just grieving a marriage. She was taking stock of her own personal shipwreck. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "He agreed to my terms," I said. "He's going to pay what he owes. From where, I have no idea. That's his problem now." "And then what? You just let him go?" There was a new edge to her voice, an edge of disbelief, of fury. This wasn't about justice for her, this was about payback. "I'm doing what I think my dad would have wanted," I said quietly. "It's not about revenge." She let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Not about revenge? Liam, do you have any idea who you are dealing with? Who I have been living with for 12 years? She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hiss. "You think this is over? You think he's just going to roll over, sign your papers, and disappear? You think he's going to let you win?" I didn't answer. The same thought had been a cold little knot in the pit of my stomach. "You have no idea," she repeated, shaking her head. "This isn't just about money for him. It's about his story. The story where he is the hero, the winner. And you were always the footnote, the charity case. He will never, ever let you be the one who takes him down. He will find a way to destroy you. He will burn everything to the ground before he lets you stand on top of the ashes." The conviction in her voice sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the night air. She knew him. She knew the man behind the mask even better than I did. "He told me things," she continued, her eyes locked on mine. "Late at night, after a few too many glasses of iced tea, he'd talk. He was proud of it, how he managed everything, how he managed everyone. He didn't just steal from your dad. He systematically dismantled your life." "What are you talking about?" "Sarah," she said, and my stomach clenched. "You think she just happened to fall for him? He pursued her, for years. He told her you were unstable, that you were a lost cause, a financial black hole. He told her she deserved better. He didn't just steal your wife, Liam. He poisoned the well and then offered her a drink. The image from that night, of them kissing under the streetlight, flashed in my mind. But now it had a new, more sinister context. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a long con, a campaign. "There's more," she said, her eyes glinting with a vengeful fire. "Things your father could never have known. Things Mark kept on his personal laptop. Not the one he uses for work. A different one. It's his real ledger. His little black book. It's not just about money. It's about everything. Every string he's ever pulled." She saw the look on my face. She knew she had me. "He keeps it in his home office, in a locked compartment in the bottom drawer of his desk. He thinks no one knows about it." She took a deep breath, looking back at the house with pure loathing. "I want him to have nothing, Liam. Nothing. Just like he's leaving me with. You got your father's justice. I want mine." I stood there in the driveway, the world tilting on its axis all over again. I had come here tonight to close a chapter. But Jessica had just ripped open a whole new book, one that was darker and uglier than I could have imagined. This wasn't just about a financial reckoning anymore. This was about excavating the truth of my entire life. Before I could respond, the front door of the house opened again. It was Mark. He stood on the porch, a silhouette against the warm light of the foyer. He didn't shout. He just looked at Jessica, his voice dangerously low. "Jessica, get in the house." She flinched, a flicker of her old fear returning. But then she looked at me, and a new resolve hardened her expression. She turned back to her husband. "No, Mark, I don't think I will." She turned and walked away from both of us, down the driveway and into the darkness of the street, not once looking back. Mark and I were left staring at each other across the damp lawn. His face was unreadable, but I could feel the hatred coming off him in waves. This was not over, not by a long shot. I got in my truck, started the engine, and drove away. The box of my dad's files on the seat beside me, a silent testament to a war I had only just begun to understand. The next day, I had to do the one thing I was dreading more than anything. I had to tell my mother. After Dad died, she'd sold the condo they had retired to and moved into a small, tidy apartment in a quiet senior living community. It was her safe place, her bubble of peaceful grief, and I was about to burst it. I found her sitting in her favorite armchair, a photo album open on her lap. She smiled when she saw me, that gentle, tired smile that always made me feel about 10 years old. "Liam, what a nice surprise." I sat on the ottoman opposite her. "Hey, Mom." I couldn't find the words. How do you tell your mother that her golden child is a monster, that her other son's life has been a lie? "Is everything all right?" she asked, her brow furrowing with concern. "You look exhausted." I took a deep breath. "Mom, I need to talk to you about Mark." Her expression immediately tightened. "What about him? Is he all right?" Her first instinct, always, was to worry about him. "He's fine, Mom. It's about the estate, about Dad's finances." I decided to start there, on the most solid, provable ground. I couldn't bring myself to tell her about Sarah. Not yet. That felt like a different kind of cruelty. Gently, I explained what I had found. I didn't use words like steal or fraud. I used softer words, like mismanaged and unwise loans. I showed her one document, just one, the second mortgage agreement. I pointed to my father's signature. "Dad had to take this out to help Mark with a business deal," I explained. "The deal failed, Mom. The debt is still on the house." She stared at the paper, her hand trembling as she held it. I don't understand. Mark is so good with money. He always has been." "He wasn't this time, Mom." She looked up at me, and her eyes weren't filled with understanding or belief. They were filled with a fierce, protective denial. "Your father must have been confused. He was getting forgetful, Liam. You know he was." "He wasn't confused about this," I said, my own voice starting to tremble with frustration. "He kept records of everything. He wrote me a letter." "A letter?" She cut me off, her voice sharp. "Why would he write you a letter and not me, his wife?" "Because he knew you wouldn't want to see it," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "Because he knew you would defend Mark no matter what. You always have." It was the wrong thing to say. I saw the wall go up. Her face, which had been soft with grief, hardened into a mask of disappointment. She pushed the mortgage document back toward me as if it were contaminated. "I think you're mistaken, Liam," she said, her voice cold and formal. "Your brother has shouldered a tremendous burden, taking care of this family, taking care of the estate. It's a lot of pressure. It's understandable that you wouldn't grasp the complexities of it. You were always jealous of him, even when you were little boys." Jealous. The word hit me like a slap. After everything I had just been through, after discovering the depth of my brother's betrayal, it all came down to that. Simple, petty jealousy. That was the only lens through which she could see me. In her story, Mark was the sun, and I was just a shadow, resentful of the light. "This isn't about jealousy, Mom," I said, my voice pleading. "This is about what's right. This is about what Dad wanted." "I know what your father wanted," she said, closing the photo album on her lap with a decisive snap. "He wanted his family to be happy. He would be horrified to see you trying to tear it apart with these accusations." She stood up, a clear dismissal. "I think you should go, Liam. You need to rest. You're not thinking clearly." I stood up, defeated. I looked at my mother, at this woman who had raised me, and I felt like I was looking at a stranger. Mark's greatest deception wasn't the money he had stolen. It was the story he had sold, a story so powerful that even faced with the truth, my own mother would rather believe the lie. I left her apartment and walked back to my truck, the silence in my head more deafening than ever. I had lost my wife, my brother, my childhood home. And now it felt like I had lost my mother too. I was completely and utterly alone. I sat in my truck for a long time, watching the residents of the community stroll by, living their quiet lives. I felt a wave of despair so heavy it was hard to breathe. What was the point of any of it? I had the money, I had the workshop. But what good was it if I had no one left? And then I thought of Jessica's words. "He will find a way to destroy you." And I thought of the laptop, the little black book. A new feeling began to push through the despair, a cold, hard anger. My mother wasn't a stranger. She was a victim, just like my dad was. She was living inside the cage Mark had built for her, and she didn't even know it. My fight wasn't over. It had been about getting justice for my dad. But now, it was about something more. It was about liberation. I had to get that laptop. I had to find the truth, the whole truth, no matter how ugly it was. Not for revenge, but to finally, once and for all, burn down the story my brother had built so the people I loved could finally be free from it. I started the truck, a grim new purpose settling over me. I finally knew what I had to do next.